Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Real Birding Podcast, the show where we crack open the world of birding and talk about our own birding adventures. I'm Will Keller, coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Caleb Putnam in Grand Rapids, Michigan, as always.
Caleb, as usual, good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk about this week's topic. It's another super timely one and a really fun one, too.
Yeah, dude, sandhill cranes are just one of those magical birds. I imagine for many birders out there, it's a spark bird because when you see them, if you see a flock of 10, 20, 300, 5,000 sandhill cranes, no matter what you're seeing, it's always a memorable experience.
Yeah, they're just such a striking bird, and they're so charismatic and so emblematic of like habitats and times of year and stuff that, even non-birders notice them.
Right, right. Before we get into sandhill cranes too much, I just want to touch on last week's bird quiz. Last week we played for y'all the song of a song sparrow, and Andy Lasar got that correct. Thanks for playing, Andy, and thanks for listening along. This week
Andy.
we are going to play for you the song of a North American bird, song or call of a North American bird, and you're going to guess the name of that bird in the comments for a chance at a shout out at the beginning of next week's episode. Let us know what you think this is. All right, if you think you know what that is, drop it in the comments. Without further ado, let's talk about cranes. Caleb, back at it again. How are we?
I'm good, dude. I'm good. Let's not talk about the weather this time for the starting point. What do you think? I've been thinking about that all week. We always do it.
We're going to drive people crazy. I'm surprised nobody's given us crap for it yet.
Yeah, so being the diverse and non-repetitive birders that we are, we're going to push right past that issue and going to go straight to sandhill cranes today. So when did you get your lifer sandhill crane? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, I was lucky enough. I grew up very close to the Sandhill Crane Festival. I forget exactly where that takes place, somewhere south of Kalamazoo, in that thin strip of farm area, agricultural area where they stage in the late fall. Southern Michigan,
Crane
northern
Fest.
Indiana is kind of a hub for these birds. Yeah.
It was Indiana, not Crane Fest over by Bellevue in
No,
East.
that's it.
Yeah, over by roughly in Battle Creek. That's
Okay.
amazing, dude, because I didn't go to that one until much later in life. I'm from the East Side, and that was it may not have even existed back then. I don't even know, but that's really a spectacular one. They've got that really good vantage point where you can see, what is it, like 10,000 or 15,000 birds landing in the marsh every day.
Yeah, so I remember seeing those. My mom would take me and my twin sister to that festival. I can't remember if it's November or October, but yeah, I remember seeing those birds even back then and thinking, "Wow, that is something special."
Dude, I have to tell you, when I was a kid, as I've said in the past, I learned from the Peterson Guide, and I didn't have mentors, internet, nothing. Like I couldn't get on the internet and like watch videos and see everything. So I had to learn literally from the plate to seeing it in the field by kind of like lucking into it. And I have this vivid memory because I never saw cranes. Like they weren't that common when I was a kid. I'm sure if I would have been birding at the big places, I would have gotten them. But when you're a kid, you're not traveling around. You don't just like bump into them. But I remember one day in like seventh grade, which had been like 1989 ish, and standing in recess at junior high out in the parking lot. And I have this vivid memory of seeing a northbound sandhill up high go over all by itself and just being like blown away that I actually saw one. It was like pure magic. The bird was not close. It didn't land, but that sighting is like totally etched in my brain. And I had nobody to share it with either. Like I'm standing there all by myself. Like,
Unmistakable. Yep. Just last week, I was back in Michigan, and my grandpa had just moved out of his house. He moved into a retirement community, and I was helping my dad move a few things out of the house. And we stepped outside, and there, look up, you can hear them before you see them. But there's a flock of 15 or 20 sandhill cranes heading south, and I thought, wow, there's just nothing like October. October afternoons, other than seeing those birds streaming south. So, yeah, such an iconic bird.
It's super iconic, and it's also it's symbolic of resilience because the populations of the migratory ones were quite low over the last many decades since the DDT era, and they've really undergone a pretty spectacular resilience and rebound, I should say. You know how it is out here. We bird Michigan. We'll go out and see a flock of 100 of them migrate over commonly these days. You always hear, like you said, you hear that sound, and so a lot of times they're soaring like hawks and eagles up way up high in the atmosphere, and it can be really hard to get on them. And how many will we get in a day at the dune on a good day? Like
Yeah, couple hundred.
hundreds, maybe, a really good day, maybe 500 to 1,000. And then, birders from the Great Lakes region will know that if you go down to Jasper Pulaski in Indiana, northwestern Indiana, which is a massive regional stopover site, getting 40,000 of them in a day is not a big deal down there.
Yeah.
And then even better if you go over to the Platte River, Nebraska, which I've still never done. Have you done that?
No.
So that place has at least 1 million that stop over in that kind of central flyway population, and that's another like bucket list one for me. I've got to get over there one of these days. What's the most you've ever seen together?
Oh gosh, when I was working in the Texas Panhandle, there was one site on my surveys, and there's these little playa lakes around there. There are these seasonal wetlands that crop up when there's a little bit of rain, and they fill up, and I think the soil is pretty clayey, so it takes a long time to drain out. But one of those playa lakes had, I don't know, 10,000 birds in it. It was a lot of sandhill cranes and lots of snow geese and Ross's geese as well. So I'm remembering that. I may have seen more just from my car driving near Jasper Pulaski. You know, the highway driving down to like Lafayette, Indiana or something? You can see off the side of the road huge flocks of sandhill cranes.
I-65.
Yeah.
The highway from hell, basically. It's like my least favorite one to drive on because of the rude truck drivers, basically. That one?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's such awesome pleasure and such misery at the same time. And I know exactly the spot you're talking about. And that really speaks to the fact that, these birds it's an interesting part of their story is like they're a symbol of the wild, right? When they're nesting, they're up in like these wild marshes and open, like pristine wetland habitats. But during migration, they're in like agricultural fields. So in the pre-settlement era, there would have been areas that would have just been all woods, that wouldn't have had any cranes. And now the fact that we've created so much soy and cornfield, throughout, at least in our region of the world, has allowed the population to really expand. And they're eating the grain spillage, like, especially corn that's spilled over. So that area you're talking about is one of the big cornfield complexes. And yeah, I've been by there and seen thousands of them standing right there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a well-adapted species for wide-scale human development. All right, Caleb, to warm us up a little bit on the rest of the sandhill crane conversation, I would like for each of us to present the other one with a trivia question about sandhill cranes, and I think you have one prepared. Do you want to ask me?
I do. Let's do it.
All right.
For your inaugural quiz question, Will, I want you to tell me how many commonly recognized subspecies of sandhill cranes there are that are non-migratory.
Wow. That normally would be a tough question if it wasn't the same one I was going to ask you. There are 3 non-migratory subspecies of sandhill crane: the Florida, Mississippi, and Cuban sandhill cranes, respectively.
Well, I thought I was going to stump you with that one, but apparently you've been doing the same research I have.
That was a good question. I would not have known that. I did not even know that there was a non-migratory population in Cuba. That is surprising.
That's exactly my answer. Which is why it's important that we do these episodes and do all the research, right? Because there's always stuff about these common birds that you think you know.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to think of a good question for you off the top of my head here. Okay. I'm going to ask you a question that I do not even know the answer to, but will be a good trivia question. Where do lesser sandhill cranes breed, and how is their sort of biology? What sets them apart from the other migratory subspecies of sandhill crane?
Boy, that's a good one. This is actually an issue that I've been thinking about a lot over the last few years, and I don't know that I have a concrete answer for it because here's what my answer is for this quiz, is that they breed further north in the taiga or subarctic zone into Canada and Alaska than the greater ones do, which is kind of odd because you'd think that the bigger one would be the tougher one for that northern climb, right? That northern harsher weather, and it appears to maybe be the opposite. But what's weird about them, this is the only reason I had a clue about it too, Will, is that when they come down like through Michigan, lessers are really rare, and greater is
Mhm.
the really common one. But yet, I think if you go to certain places like Nebraska or maybe even on the East Coast, the lessers are really abundant. So it's almost like they have a really specific migration pathway that they're using, even though they're continent wide, they're rare in between those flyways. But am I right? That's the best I got.
That's what I'm seeing online is that they breed in northern Alaska and maybe also even Siberia.
And that's a whole other topic, right? That is certainly correct. The sandhills that breed in Siberia, and did people even know this? Like birds that are wintering in Texas have had transmitters put on them, and then the summertime they go to Siberia and cross the Bering Strait from Alaska over, and then in the fall they come do it again. And every once in a blue moon, when they're coming back, they bring a common crane or even a hooded crane with them. This has been happened.
Right.
This has happened a few times now. That's a nice little factoid for you about how those Eurasian cranes end up in the interior of the North American continent in the winter, which they do.
You know what's interesting is I think you and me actually got on some of the first lesser sandhill cranes that were ever documented in Michigan. Am I right in thinking that one of our birds from the dune was the first one reported in the state?
On eBird, that is certainly the case, and I've got the bird pulled up here. So I remember it was quite a funny thing because at the time I wasn't really thinking, I wasn't ever looking at cranes that carefully. But our buddy Rick, who was with us, got on this one bird, and so in this photo, it's the top middle bird here. I don't know if you can see my cursor.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, "Man, this bird is like way smaller than all the other ones around it." And every time they circled around, you could always like, here it is here. You could pick it out really easily. So we started taking these photos of it as it passed overhead, and we started doing the research, looking into it, and all of a sudden you realize, yeah, it actually was one, and this got reviewed by the committee here in Michigan because they are that rare, and I think it is the first committee accepted record, or certainly one of very few ever. And it's, in my opinion, this is because people really aren't looking. They're not looking that carefully, and because it's probably tough to identify. Wasn't that totally fascinating, dude? Like, look at the leg length on these. It's actually not as hard to tell them apart in direct comparison as you'd think. The beak is like a half the size of what it is on the other birds. The legs barely stick out past the tail versus on the graders, they're way farther back. And it's just a smaller bird with like darker wings, darker flight feathers than the graders.
So I have a theory on why they might be hard to pick out, even if they're more common than people think they actually are. If you're looking at a field full of sandhill cranes, and even if you have a spotting scope, there's going to be cranes at different distances, which is going to make some look taller and some look shorter, and some big build and some little build, and some short-legged and some long-legged. And it's hard to tell if what you're seeing is actually a factor of what the bird looks like versus if it's going to be attributed to it being closer or further away from the viewer. So I imagine that these are actually probably easier to identify in flight if you're looking at every
Yes.
single bird individually than if you're actually looking out in a field, which is how many people look at sandhill cranes.
I have to believe that's the case. You would have to have them standing all upright and relaxed and side by side, not farther from the observer, if you were to try to figure this out when they're perched. Even though lessers are obviously shorter than the graders, like it is a good field marker. It's just not easy to see it when there's a big crowd of them out there. So that was certainly a very fascinating experience. And we had a second one too, like in one of the subsequent years. And I think that one's still under review. Um,
Yeah.
but switching gears, Will. One of the things I think the listeners will get a kick out of, because folks in a lot of areas of the U.S. are going to know that this is not an easy bird in a lot of areas of the country. Like this is the Sandhill Crane all-time map, and if I zoom in certain areas here between the flyways, there's big areas where just not that many of them. There's not that many records, and then what you get is in the flyways, you can see these dark purple cells pop up, and what's so cool is this is one of my favorite eBird maps of any species when I figured this out. But the Jasper Pulaski population is coming from breeding populations in Minnesota and Wisconsin and kind of in up here in Canada. And in the fall, these birds come into Jasper Pulaski, which is here, and you can see the big dark purple cells. Birders from everywhere show up and have incredible experiences there. And then when those birds leave to go further south, the path that they're taking is perfectly shown by the eBird frequency data. It's just so powerful. And you can see the
And
path
where are they
here
going?
through, they're going, depending on how harsh the weather is, they'll get pushed by sort of ice and freezing temperatures, either into like southern Indiana here, Kentucky, Tennessee. And you can see these that they have specific sites in each state. The birders are really well aware of these. And big numbers of them will hole up there until the weather clears. And if it clears in February, March, then they just go right back north and head right back to Wisconsin and beyond. In the olden days, these birds would go all the way down into Georgia and Florida, and they may still do that to an extent. I haven't seen transmitter data, but I think a lot of them certainly winter, well north of Florida and Georgia because of how mild it is these days. But isn't that an incredible one though? Like the path is just right there in eBird.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It definitely explains why I don't see them near my house in Charlotte. That's a pretty rare bird around here. I think they get seen in the area maybe annually, but if you zoom in on the Piedmont in North Carolina, they are pretty scarce.
And that was certainly always the case in like New Jersey and stuff, especially before the population explosion. Um, they just aren't that numerous along the East Coast, man. And I think the same pattern exists in the West too. You can see some of these. This is the Platte River population here, and then there's like specific pathways, and then also the western ones heading down into California and such for the winter. So New Mexico's got a big flyway, and I know Lubbock, Texas has a huge wintering population. A buddy of mine, Justin Bosler from Austin, Texas, has spent a bunch of time up in here, and he's even found 3 common cranes in one of the flocks there, which is incredible.
Wow, that's a dream.
Dreambird, absolute dreambird. They had one at Jasper Pulaski too, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was able to go see that bird, and that was a pretty spectacular, man.
Yeah. Now we just got to get one at the dunes at Saugatuck. That would really you'd have like nearly the train or the crane trifecta with that bird.
Dude, I have thought about that bird so many times, but I tell you, the problem is common cranes they're going to go back west to get to Siberia, and I just don't see it ending up on our side of the lake. I think it's going to go west of Lake Michigan. I wish I was
probably
wrong,
right, but yeah. Whooping crane is
the
another
common
one to
crane.
think about.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, whooping crane. You've got the reintroduced birds from like the Wisconsin population. They're always milling around. And then this actually is the common crane that was in Indiana like 4 or 5 years ago. And thankfully was able to be successfully chased by folks. It's a pretty different looking bird. It's got this black in the face, black throat, big white thing through the face. But I tell you, when there's 13,000 cranes standing in a field and only one of them looks like this, good luck. Good luck finding that.
So Caleb, what can you tell me about their courtship behavior? I think these cranes are pretty unique in their the way that they attract a mate and defend their territory.
Dude, these guys have one of like the most iconic behavioral, like the most inspiring behavioral things that I've seen in any birds, and it really is one of the reasons the public these are so beloved to the public. But these courtship dances that they do, have a look at this. So the pairs will they'll stand together, and everything gets really like agitated and energetic, and you'll hear that call back and forth where the second bird kind of calls over top of the first after it begins. Sounds like a pterodactyl or something wild. And then for pair maintenance and bonding, they'll stand there and dance. Like, so lots of like animated jumps and bending down and giving gifts like sticks and food items and so on. And
Yeah.
Have you ever seen this, Will? Like, it's quite spectacular.
I have not seen that. It would definitely stop me in my tracks if I did. I might assume that they're like looking at a snake down on the ground and that they're afraid of it and they're trying to draw attention to it or something,
Totally. Yeah, it would not necessarily be obvious what they're doing, but I've noticed I've spent a lot of time with cranes the last few years. I've done some studies on them actually. And what I notice is that the pairs are doing these dances even in the fall, in the middle of winter and stuff. So like that really speaks to the monogamy and to the pair bonding that lasts throughout the year. Even when they go to the wintering grounds, they're still pair bonded, according to what I'm seeing. And as far as I know, if the mate doesn't die, they will stay together until one of them does, and they quite well survive. I think these birds go as far as like 35 years into adulthood if they live out their adult lives.
Yeah, it's the whole the fact that they're doing that sort of behavior year round is a kind of a reminder that even though we can't get in these birds' heads and know how they're feeling all the time, you can tell that there's some sort of emotion and affection being shown kind of at all times. And there's something about these monogamous pairs that really draws us in as humans. I feel like we can relate with them really well, you know?
Exactly, exactly. Not that we want to make examples of monogamy with birds in general, but with certain birds like these and albatrosses and swans and some of the bigger birds, it certainly is a really beautiful thing. They're really good role models in that sense, and they're doting parents too. Like this would have been another good trivia question for folks, but Will, why don't you let everybody know what the name of a chick of a sandhill crane?
They're called colts, which I don't. Do you know why they're called colts? Is it because they're kind of big and clumsy, like a baby horse?
I don't know. Although the fact that they call it a murder of crows, for example, to me, it's probably gibberish. It's probably just random. I don't know. They
Yeah,
certainly don't
people
look like
trying to
a
be
horse or do
creative.
anything. They don't. Yeah, it's endlessly entertaining. Like I love that stuff. It's just a little silly, a little goofy at times. So they really are cute little birds, and is they're precocial, you know. So like when they hatch, the bird is instantly able to walk and kind of pick for food for itself. But what it does need is for the parents to kind of guard it and walk around with it for months on end until it's able to fly on its own, especially for defense from predators. And it's so fun to watch these guys. You can immediately tell when they have a colt present because the adults will start staying on the ground in situations where they would never normally do it. They would always just fly off. And as soon as you see them in like probably like May to June doing that, you know there's a colt there with them.
Oh, and they're so protective and so territorial. At the farm that my family has, there's a pond, and the cranes breed out in the pond. And once you cross the corner coming around to the pond, the cranes erupt in a cacophony of they're just screaming at you. You'd think that there's 10 of them, but there's only two, and they're just going crazy. And until you realize that there's a colt nearby, you're like, "What are they doing? Why don't they just fly away?" But yep, sure enough.
100%. Yep. They can't really hide their intention if you're paying attention to them, because of the level of protection that those babies. Will, another thing that we've got to hit upon because people are always curious about this. So, why is this bird so rufous? What is up with this? It looks like some of the feathers are rufous and some of them are gray, and then the rufous stops kind of right below the head here. Like, what's going on with that?
Well, you are rapidly approaching the boundary of my bird expertise. I'm assuming that that's a juvenile bird molting into adulthood or a non-breeding bird molting into breeding plumage. Am I wrong on either of those counts?
I stumped you. I thought I should have used that as my trivia question.
Okay.
um, so there's actually a very specific thing going on here, and what the birds are doing is they're actually preening iron-containing soil from marshes onto these feathers to create this ferruginous or red rusty appearance. And it is not actual feather pigmentation. It's environment. It's like
No
literally
way.
they're painting themselves body paint. Yeah. And
Wow.
I don't know that it increases their attractiveness to the other sex or exactly what purpose it serves. I'm sure it has some social purpose, but that's another really interesting factoid about them because at certain times of the year they are really, really orange.
And I can imagine it helps with blending into the environment in corn stubble.
Yeah, that's quite plausible too.
Caleb, I don't want to get controversial here, but I think it must be touched upon. How do you feel about the hunting of sandhill cranes?
No, we gotta do it, right? I mean, it's a hot button topic in many states. There's certain states that allow hunting. Ours doesn't. Michigan still at this point in time. Hunters love to eat them, and It's ribeye of the sky. You hear that phrase used all the time because it tastes so darn good. You know, boy, hunting's a tough one because it evokes an emotional response in a lot of birders that they don't like it because the death of the animal is so final and you're taking the life of the animal and you didn't have to. And I do understand where folks are coming from with that. I can certainly I've hunted myself and I respect people are coming at it from that perspective. But the flip side of it is that if the population is being managed appropriately and monitored, and we make sure that the fact that they're being hunted in certain numbers isn't affecting the population in a bad way, then I think it could be an excellent management tool. And it can, hunting can be something that brings a lot of new interest into birds in the natural world. And not to mention, if you're going to shoot a crane, you have to purchase a gun, and the excise taxes from that gun directly buys up habitat that goes into the marshes and habitats that we need to support cranes, and not just cranes, waterfowl, rails, bitterns, grebes, shorebirds, all of these other things that aren't even being hunted. So I don't know, man. In the mix of things, it's probably a win as long as it's being effectively managed, and I think it is. States like I think Kentucky has a hunt. There's
Yep.
limits on how many can be hunted, and a lot of money and a lot of conservation work comes out of that. So I'm kind of I'm kind of neutral about it, I'll say. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. And as a non-hunter, I don't want to overstep. I think that there is very little hunting that is an overall negative for wildlife populations. I think trophy hunting in Africa is obviously probably not the best because many of those populations are declining. But in North America, if you're hunting white-tailed deer, if you're hunting waterfowl, if things are protected species, then you can't hunt them anyways. So, nobody's shooting endangered species, or at least nobody is promoting the hunting of endangered species in the U.S. So, I really wish that conservationists and hunters could get along. And I think by and large they do, but every once in a while something will pop up on my Facebook feed with someone railing about hunters and why it's not necessary. Um, and I just think even if you have valid ethical criticisms of what hunters are doing, unnecessarily taking the life of a wild animal, I hear that. I just don't think it's a good fight to pick. I think we're too aligned in our overall goals to be picking these fights.
Well, and this will harken back. I'm going to put this page up here, but my job when I worked for the Michigan DNR at a joint position with Audubon was exactly what you're talking about. And this is the page that we created, and it's called My Birds. And this is a joint effort of to put the birding community and hunting community in the state of Michigan together, and they're still going. It's wonderful, and they've had great success with it. So they do a mixture of like game stuff and non-game, and they also put birders and hunters in the same room together because they don't normally talk, right? And
Yeah.
you can develop a lot more respect and understanding when you do that kind of thing. So, and it also is great because they'll do a lot of tours that bring birders to state game areas that they're not used to, that they haven't paid attention to, and they educate birders like, these state game areas are that you're enjoying your black terns and your least bitterns at. That was paid for 100% by money from the taxes of guns and ammunition. So it's really a wonderful program. I'd recommend everybody jump in there and subscribe to that.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Sandhill cranes, man. What more could we possibly say? Such a great bird. We're so lucky to have them being a common bird in much of the U.S.
We really are, and it's just one of them ones that when the public sees and hears them, it invokes such inspiration, and I hope folks who don't have them around can maybe make a point in October. October is a great month for them. November is good. Maybe take a trip to Jasper Pulaski or out to the Platte River or Bosque del Apache in New Mexico or the Lubbock, Texas area. There's places all over the place. Montana has them. California's got them. At some point, take a trip and go check these things out when they are in those huge flocks because it is incredibly inspiring. And, I've always said like the earth would be so dead without birds, without the sounds and the sights. And this is one of them ones that inspires you to no end when you're able to interact with those giant sandhill flocks.
I completely agree. Yep, get out there this week and go see some Sandhill cranes. Please play the bird quiz. And as always, like, share, and subscribe, and let us know if there's any topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, everybody.